There is, I have to say, slow and steady progress because a lot of the times over the past 1 year, every time we've felt that we have managed to corner the Chinese, suddenly a new crisis magically breaks out. So you think you've cornered the Chinese the first time, you've got COVID under control. Well, uh, the United States is just recovering from COVID. India is, I would hope to say, on the downside of one of the most devastating months in living memory. The Japanese are experiencing, incidentally, just a few weeks before the Olympic Games are due in Japan, devastation. So it's just all coincidental, it seems, that all the countries that China doesn't like are going from crisis to crisis. Another time when we try to corner the Chinese on the Uyghur genocide, for example, suddenly there are problems happening in Palestine. Uh, Now, the Chinese, of course, are deeply concerned with what is happening in Palestine at the UN, and of course, have blamed the Americans for creating the problem. But they don't want to discuss what's happening in Xinjiang. In fact, the Chinese state over the past 1 month has been organizing a trip through Xinjiang called a Date with China, where they've been inviting journalists, including their own, to see the culture of Xinjiang and all the happy people, and check out the dance, the good food that is served there, because it's not a place that's supplying slave labor. It's actually supposed to be a great happy place, the Chinese dream, one would call it. So, despite the distractions, every time we get an opportunity to refocus where the problem is, and that doesn't take away from issues that we have, things that we can do better, things that we can handle better. But without addressing where the problem is originating from, if you don't, you'll keep having the same problem again and again. Now, a new bill, a 470-page document, has been moved in the US Congress, which is looking to not only one, term what's happening at Xinjiang as a Uyghur genocide, but also re-engage the United States with international agencies, re-look at manufacturing, re-look at trade, and re-look at relationship with allies as a matter of law within the United States. So let's open up this conversation. They're calling it the Eagle Act. This is, of course, being introduced in the US Congress as our foreign minister rather, is very much in the US. He's just met with the UN Secretary General, having a meeting with the top officials of the Biden administration as we speak. Let's open up this conversation. Preeti Upala joining us on the broadcast, Sanjay Kapoor, Ambassador Deepak Vora, and Professor Shrikant Kondapalli is joining us as well. Professor Kondapalli, if I can begin with you. Now, the genesis of the conversation where I began with is every time we seem to focus on what's the issue, where did the virus come from, things seem under control. Last time we tried it, suddenly there were tensions in France, and the French had suddenly become, Muslim haters. Now there's tensions once again in the Middle East. I'm just waiting for Kim Jong Un to launch another missile and create another tension elsewhere. So the rest of us are firefighting other problems, and we forget what the original problem is. How do we get our focus back?
Mao Zedong used to say that don't let your neighbors sleep properly. If they sleep properly, then it will be trouble for you because they regain energy. So possibly what you are explaining could be contextualized from that perspective. But the larger picture is obviously China is the second largest economy. It has stakes. And it doesn't want to be another Soviet Union in terms of the American ire on China. They escaped the 9/11 because in May 2001, the then President Bush was identifying China as a strategic competitor. But then within 6 months, 9/11 happened, and then the whole focus went to global counterterrorism, coalition against terrorism, etc. And then you have now the COVID-19. The Chinese were having a hard time during the Trump administration on the tariff wars. And with the COVID-19, they got distracted once again. The global community got distracted once again internally for the infections, addressing of the infections and so on. So this is good time for China in terms of distracting. I want to quote another Chinese strategist, Sun Tzu, who used to say that the best way to distract others is to help the adversaries of your main adversary. So that way it will become easier for them to focus on, as you mentioned, Palestinian issue or France or other. So they get distracted with these and they don't focus on China. So the arena is then open for China to pursue its goals. And the 19-party Congress in 2017 mentioned how to occupy the center stage. Basically, would mean that how to fit into the American shoes by occupying the regional order, global order, and the power that is part of that. So I think it is a game plan. Not all the time you can pursue this, but then this is an opportunity for China.
Okay. Preeti, how distracted then are we? Because we saw, this major Quad meeting take place, and 3 working groups are supposed to have been constituted, and there was a lot of talk of focusing trade away from China. But how focused is America right now, which is still facing domestic challenges, where we still don't have clarity on what's happening with the Wuhan probe? Is there now bipartisan consensus on this? Do we see it?
Namaste. Thank you, Mr. Gulati. Thank you for having me on your show. Always pleasure to be here. Unfortunately, I think the U.S. and this particular, our current administration is very distracted. As much anger as there is on the streets of the U.S. and as bipartisan support that is present against China, I still think that the economy, the COVID crisis, the rising fatalities, and also the racial divide in the country are taking the front steps at the moment. They are, taking all the priority or the attention and focus of this administration. It's up to, I'm finding more anger coming from the Republican side, where there's plenty of senators who are really being vocal about their anger and questioning. They've had several Senate hearings with even Dr. Fauci, the WHO, and CDC, and so on, and really trying to
probe. I've been listening to what Paul Ryan has been up to. But, equally, then, Preeti, a lot of administration officials at every level are being very critical of China. You have the current defense secretary who's been trying to fix up these meetings with his Chinese counterpart, which he wants to do on a phone call, and the Chinese have basically said, you don't follow our protocol, we won't give you the meeting. So a lot of administrative officials are being vocal, but what are they doing in real terms? How is something different? Because a few months ago, we saw legislation moved on Tibet, on Hong Kong, banning of trade coming in or production coming in from Xinjiang. Has some practical step being taken?
No, unfortunately, because these steps have to really be taken from the very top. So unless you have a Secretary Blinken coming out with statements or meetings or really, speaking directly to his Chinese counterparts or really, holding a press conference and exactly telling the world where America stands on this issue, which they have not done in a year and a half of this pandemic, unless that happens, or even President Biden himself says something like that, or the VP says something like that, nothing will happen. As people can get as upset as they want. Obviously, doctors and medical health professionals, all the administrators on various levels are extremely upset, but they can only do so much.
To be fair, at least there are some Americans talking about this. We are Monvrat in this country. Members of parliament, we don't have an investigation into what happened in Wuhan. We are not investigating documents. We've sat on the WHO for a long period of time. And we just realized that, the Chinese got their vaccine pushed through, but we couldn't even get Covaxin pushed through. We are quiet on Tibet, quiet on Hong Kong. Don't want to say much on what's happening with the Uyghurs. By say much, I mean say absolutely nothing publicly. We don't have a position on any of these matters. Ambassador Deepak Vora, why not? Because I'm repeatedly told that our actions will speak louder than our words, and I trust the people who are telling me this. But at some point of time, if you're waiting for the Americans to act, Where is our position? Where is our inquiry into what happened into Wuhan? What did we do with our term at the WHO?
Thank you very much, Mr. Gulati. It's always a pleasure to be with you, to learn from you, from Mr. Kapoor, from Professor Kondapalli, and of course from the amazing Mr. Thala from the United States. You asked me a very interesting question. What are we doing? Why aren't we speaking up? In diplomacy, we are trained that sometimes silence is far more meaningful than using a megaphone. It can be deafening. So we were talking about what is happening in the United States, the first question you asked. Yes, they have the capability to investigate, to find out much more than we have, let's be honest about it. We do have our capability, but it is not at the same level. We are truthful and honest about it. You were talking about the Eagle Bill a little while ago, based on the American bald eagle, which is very interesting, ensuring American labor, leadership, etc., etc. So you rightly said the anger and angst against China in the US and elsewhere. People believe it has cheated and conned its way to US technology and investment. This can be seen. The writing on the wall is very, very clear. So you might recall the conversation between Joe Biden and Xi Jinping. I think it was in February, at the end of which Joe Biden said this guy doesn't have a democratic bone in his body. And if Jinping had thought that Joe Biden would get into bed with him, kiss and make up, no, it's not happening. He has told Joe Biden, a group of bipartisan American senators, that if we don't get our act together, China will eat our lunch. So what is happening now is precisely this: to prevent China from eating America's lunch, because America's threshold of pain is very low, sir. You know this better than I do. It reacts with fury when its vital interests, economic, political, military, information, technological, are threatened. Remember a place called Afghanistan, another country called Iraq, another country called Syria. Remember OBL, a chap called Osama something Laden in Pakistan? Well, let me tell you this, sir. Let's go back just 1 year. May 2020. US lawmaker tables a bill in Congress to authorize the American president to recognize Tibet as an independent country. Then there comes another bill which says that we should teach China a lesson through various actions that the United States can take. Then comes the Taiwan Invasion Preventive Act. Then a US congressman introduces 5 bills. Earlier this year, sir, I'm talking of 2021 AC, after COVID, which says that we must challenge China's rise in military and economic power, which is one of the greatest security threats we face. There is a Secure Our Systems Against China's Tactics Act, China Technology Transfer Control Act, the China Debt Repayment Resolution Act, etc., etc. Sometimes it can even be amusing. You know, there's also a bill in the US Congress that Jinping shouldn't be called president. He should be referred to as secretary or general secretary. It's called Name the Enemy Act. We think it's funny. Sir, let me complete. Then another fellow introduces 5 bills saying the greatest threat to American freedom and justice is the Chinese Communist Party. What does this mean, sir? This means that there is bipartisan support. It's a matter of time before it percolates down into action.
But where does it turn into policy?
Precisely. So if you follow the American system,
the Quad meeting was something definitive, something major happened. Okay, that was very.
Let me complete, sir. I've served in the United States, sir. When when a bill is introduced in Congress and it is passed, it becomes law. Then anyone can challenge the American government, even in a court, in a district court, saying, "Why aren't you following the law?" You know, there's even a law in the United States called influence, intelligence on nefarious foreign leaders using education networks for corrupt enrichment. Number 1 target, Jinping. Sir, China has more swords of Damocles hanging over its head than you can count. I don't think China knows this legend, sir.
I'm assuming that there are some costs and consequences to be borne, but not seeing those costs and consequences yet because...
Give it time, sir. Give it time. Don't be in a hurry.
Okay, fine. Rome wasn't built in a day. Sanjay Kapoor, so in strategic thinking, let's say we are assuming that the Americans are going to do the heavyweight lifting on this, and we are going to stay stone silent. We'll, send our troops to Galwan, and we'll not really take any help from China this time around. We'll take help from everyone else. But at some point of time, do we need to take a position on the Uyghur genocide? Do we need to do we care where the Wuhan virus came from? And if we do care, why aren't we doing anything about it?
This is a very, very interesting question, Rishabh. And as Professor Siddha Kondapalli and Preeti, as well as Ambassador Bora said, It is far complex, far layered than what it seems like at the moment. But, I think a lot of it in terms of who's behind the Wuhan virus, how it all played out, we leave it to the legacy country. This is a failing of our colonial past. We don't investigate. I'll give you a small example. Last year in February, one of the laboratories in India, which is in IIT Delhi called Kusma Laboratories, they investigated the genome sequence of the Wuhan virus, and they found there were 4 HIV inserts into it. So it was very clear that it had a human intervention built into the virus. It was not something that actually happened on its own. And they came out with a pre-paper. It was not peer-reviewed, so it was a pre-paper. It was put out. And then all hell broke loose, because what India was implying through its own indigenous efforts is to show that the virus which came out from Wuhan was, and not a virus which was, jumped from the bat and came to people. It was something that had been put together by some conniving, diabolical mind. And there should have been an effort to go beyond that. But we succumbed to pressure. We succumbed to pressure from the United States of America, because at that time, Dr. Fauci and others were the ones who were the Mahagurus and the Vishwagurus of the Wuhan virus. And they decided the narrative. Similarly, China also reacted very strongly against what the paper had done, and it was shut down. And after that, not a word about it. The fact of the matter is that the whole thing that the IIT lab discovered a year ago is being repeated by what's the gentleman called the guy who wrote in the bulletin, and the others who have also written about it. But the truth is that we can't even own up what is ours. So there is, you look at it, the way entire Wuhan has been fought, whether it is the regimen for fighting it in terms of medicine, everything comes from the West. So do you think we have a stand on Wuhan? We have none, because I think we recognize our own strength. We know exactly what it means to fight China. We are the only country besides Vietnam which has actually gone to war. China, the US can make all the noises sitting 5,000 kilometers away, but we are the ones who face them day in and day out. And despite all the provocation.
Okay, so there's a reality check, and let's face it, not everybody can trust wholeheartedly the Americans. There was a very funny Biden-Kamala Harris Monvrat when the crisis in India started for 4 or 5 days, until I think hopefully somebody advised them that India is very, very upset. And then they overcompensated subsequently. But that's why a lot of people still don't trust America for this exact reason, because when the push comes to shove, silence. Okay, very disturbing. So Sanjay Kapoor, okay, so obviously we can't go whole hog, and we can't be having debates in parliament and having inquisitions to the level the Americans are having. But can we do anything? Because we did sit on the chairmanship of WHO and there was not a peep.
What we need to do, Rishabh, is that we need to re-establish, strengthen our democratic credentials, challenge China on Tibet, challenge China on the way they treat their people, because there is a great amount of disquiet. It's not that people are very happy in China. The fact of the matter is that we allow China to turn around and say Indian democracy doesn't work. We have to show Indian democracy works, and works better than having an authoritarian state the Chinese have. Because since 2008, 2009, when the global slowdown took place, Chinese, people who spin doctors went around telling the world that democracy has failed, and we are the only system that works. So we need to break that by challenging them on every count.
The last time we took those concrete steps, not too long ago, Shrikant Kondapalli, India became the first country to ban the Chinese apps. That's a very, very significant step, and those bans have not been overturned. And a lot of those companies are now no longer have a future. Consequently, we did take the unprecedented step of having a massive level escalation in Ladakh. Deploying every frontline weapon system that we had, which I've never seen in my lifetime, the level of a response. So these were two concrete statements. But every time now we put the Biden administration to the fine-tooth comb, that has Biden spoken on this, has Blinken spoken on this, why aren't they speaking on this enough, what are they doing? Should we be speaking on this at the highest levels, at the junior levels? I mean, which members of parliament, 750 members of parliament we have, which of them are moving a private member's bill? We all know it's meaningless, but it sends the statement.
I think the Indian position is let's build the capacity to counter the challenges. Number two, in the 2+2 dialogue, as well as in the summit level meetings, at the Quad some concrete doable projects like the vaccine production, 1 billion vaccine production this year by J&J. And by the way, Dr. Jaishankar is going to meet the J&J representatives and Pfizer and Moderna and others in the next day or two. And in the talks with Blinken, there is also the mention about the implementation of the Quad in the Indo-Pacific. And then there is also the issue related to the capacity buildup in terms of our own requirements in facing the challenges that we are at the moment. So I think there is a focus on critical technologies, vaccine production, material capabilities, which basically translates to arms transfer or co-production or transfer of technology and so on. And probably these are the areas that would help us in deterring the challenges that we are facing.
So that's exactly what I've been told also, that we have to turn the tables on the Chinese. We have to quietly do all the things that we need to do. And these issues we will come and tackle when we are ready to tackle them. Right now, you can't go and occupy Tibet. You can't push the Chinese militarily out of the entire Aksai Chain area. And these are economic challenges. In the end, the Cold War ended because the economic system of one of the players collapsed. So, Professor Kondapalli, before I bring back the other guests, within this, what is the room of maneuver? Because how can we sit as the world's largest democracy and be preaching to the world that transparent systems are important when you have China showing you the finger at Wuhan and not say that this is a problem, that there needs to be a global investigation, we need to have our own investigation, we need to have an open hearings, and not leave it to Dr. Fauci, with all due respect, who is not being able to explain why he personally was sending funds or allocating funds to that Wuhan Virus Institute.
Indeed, there is a collaboration between the Americans and the Chinese, also the French, also the Australians, also the Canadians in regard. The Chinese have put across the countries of concern argument, and then they started spreading the weapons of mass destruction, including biological weapons and others, to countries like Pakistan or others. And as a quid pro quo, China wanted the advanced biotechnologies to be transferred to China from the US, from other countries. So this quid pro quo worked also in the interest of the US, because they were looking for a cheaper option. Instead of manufacturing these at Fort Detrick in Maryland, they would have manufactured that in Wuhan or other laboratories. So that quid pro quo happened, and that is where we also got stuck, because here we do not have an independent voice in terms of exploring the issues on Wuhan and others.
No, but why not? What do we do? If it were to be created, I'm wondering, there are 750 members of parliament, okay? The bill that we're discussing is just one such a person in America, then trying to build consensus. Why don't we have nobody who wants to speak up?
I think it is a defensive approach, and the first thing we did was to evacuate the Indians in January, February last year. The 3 flights that took place, and we offered some assistance, 12 tons of medical equipment and others to Wuhan. So it is a defensive measure, and I think in general, the Ministry of External Affairs after the 1962 war, they have this view that we should first build up the capabilities.
Well, you're saying 62, then we are 70 years later still building capabilities. Now, let's take it to the other tag before I run out of time. Ambassador Deepak Vohra, in the worst case scenario, we're looking at bioengineered weapons of mass destruction that have now killed 3 million people and debilitated the global economy. In the worst case scenario, attempts are being made to debilitate economic systems in India, to thereby force democratic systems into regime change. This is, if you look at the worst case scenario, it's as diabolical as it gets. Now, if even a percentage or a kernel of truth is in any of these things, this is an attack on then the sovereignty and the ability, economics and otherwise, of democracies in the world. So how can the largest democracy then not have an opinion on it?
That's a very interesting question again, Mr. Gulati, but when you respond to a provocation, you should be aware of what your strengths are. Diplomacy, like governance, is the art of keeping different audiences pleased, singing different tunes to different people. Sometimes, sir, and I'm being cynical, it is good to have weapons of mass deception. Evidence or absence of evidence about our action does not mean evidence of absence of act. Do you understand what I'm saying? I mean, if there is no evidence that we are acting, you can't assume that we are not acting. Basically, I believe that we are responding. We took the lead in economic decoupling with banning those apps, etc., reducing our trade figures. Wait till the middle of next year. You'll see how much our trade has come down. Yes, action is taking place. You know it better than I do. We may not use a megaphone to proclaim what we are doing. You don't want to forewarn the enemy. It's very easy to criticize, very difficult to appreciate. Let me tell you, sir, our quiet, effective diplomacy is far more effective, and I say this with full authority after 50 years in the game, than the abusive, vituperative version that China practices. China can bully, India seeks to befriend, sir.
Okay, but again, I'm looking at worst case scenarios. Worst case scenario, Preeti Upala, that Russian interference, Chinese interference, one way or the other, regardless of which way it goes, is trying to perpetuate regime change and to cripple democratic systems. Every time there is an issue here in India, you see Pakistani accounts that are spreading, bot accounts that are spreading hate messages within the country. We know these things are taking place and they're using democratic systems. So in the worst case scenario, if they're doing this, can we say that the slow and steady silent approach is the only approach, or is there any other approach?
Well, you painted a very scary picture, Mr. Gulati. Indeed, all of what you've mentioned is a possibility. It's actually happening as we speak. I do agree with Ambassador Vora. I do trust our democratic structures. I trust India, Bharat, and the spirit of Bharat and the people and our leadership, that they will, at the end of the day, do the right thing by the country. We do have to be a bit patient. But the famous saying, if you don't have a seat at the table, then you're probably on the menu. We are a menu item right now, and I think we need to correct that as soon as possible. And I think this trip by Dr. Jaishankar will prove to be important, I hope, but there should be many more exchanges like that. And I think it's time for us as a government, as an administration, as a country to really step up and stake our claim. It seems like the U.S. is really taking a back step with the probe.
What is the conversation that if an American defense secretary wants to speak to his Chinese counterparts, not once but makes 3 attempts, and the Chinese say, sorry, not interested, how does this go down? I'm sure the Americans are not used to calling up someone and the phone not being answered.
No, they're not, but with America, it's always their own self-interest. So obviously there is some self-interest here at play where, they can very easily ignore, phone calls not being picked up because of the larger scheme. And as I keep saying, sadly, this administration, as far as foreign policy and geopolitics goes, they're still trying to figure things out. So they're going to take their time, I think, to get to the right.
Okay, so this boils down to reality checks, and before I run out of time, Sanjay ji, when a crisis starts and how well or badly that crisis is handled in a democratic system, eventually then falls on the leaders of those democratic system, whether it's happening at the state level or at the central level. We've had a very difficult time, and just because
for ourselves and do what we need to do.
Just because things are better now, it's not that things were not good, not great just a couple of months ago. So there are going to be consequences to bear, democratic, political consequences. I don't know whether it reflected in Bengal or not, but there are going to be consequences to bear. Now, within those consequences, every time somebody says China, there are people here who are saying, oh, that's the distraction, that this is a political convenience to blame China. How much of that is real and how much of scrutiny actually should apply to what happened in China?
I don't know whether the domestic politics that you're referring to, especially when it comes to subjecting the leadership out here to scrutiny, is really playing out here. I mean, nobody is actually talking about China. They recognize that India's political leadership has diminished quite a bit. I think there is also a realization from objective people that even when it comes to practicing foreign policy, since the time we had the second surge, we have actually lost a lot of ground, whether it is providing vaccine to our neighbors or doing whatever. China's surge in providing vaccine to provide support and succor is the one which is dominating. So I'm not very sure that the Indian leadership has been able to really provide an answer, or this debate is taking place in this country. And I'm unlikely it will take place. But if, as I said earlier, if you had real democracy where there was freedom for everybody to be asking questions, for MPs to be asking questions about Wuhan, how did this second virus came in? Is it a bioweapon? Is it something else that is happening? There is such aggression in terms of controlling the narrative. I mean, you look at Uttar Pradesh, where you have a chief minister who says that if anybody talks about anything pertaining to the virus, you'll probably see the state is going to look to seize his property or do something very nasty. So in that environment, which is very similar to China, because we should not be like China, we should be told time and again that we are a democracy and we have to be very distinct from China, that we can fight China.
Okay. But there is no doubt that for people who have seen devastation, run through their cities and families, that the first angst will come out on the immediate leadership. So this is my problem. Professor Kondapalli, if this is, and I'm giving a worst case scenario conspiracy theory, but I've started believing a lot of these in the past couple of years. But if indeed there is somebody sitting in Beijing and, monitoring developments in India, and they're feeling thrilled, they're feeling so happy, right? That, oh my God, they're in trouble. Now there'll be political consequences, there'll be political chaos, and if a strong government in India was a threat to us, the weaker they get, the better it is for us. If somebody is making that calculation, then how can we here explain that without calling out the Chinese? Now we have to wait for a New York Times article to tell us that a blackout in Mumbai might have been a Chinese cyber attack. Are we afraid in admitting that the Chinese are trying to mess with us? What's the problem?
I think this is a passing phase. Once we clean up the COVID-19 in a few months' time, we would respond in kind. We have seen the Western and Chinese press onslaught on India during the last 1.5 months. This is also a passing phase. I would assume that we will have things in place because the fundamental thing is India is stable. India has a 6th largest or 5th largest economy in the world. India is ticking on other fronts as well. The fundamentals are clear. Fundamentals are strong. So I do not think none of these would matter.
Okay.
Democracy is stable.
You've been hopeful. I'm out of time. Ambassador Vora, quick last 30 seconds.
We're a 10,000-year-old civilization. Don't be in a hurry. Move at your own pace. It's very difficult to get the elephant up and running, but once he starts running, you can't stop him, sir. I just say have patience. We will win.
Okay. For people watching this broadcast, perhaps equal scrutiny to response within this country of how we've responded to a challenge. Sometimes we've done remarkably well. Okay, there have been cyclones in this country. I mean, I remember Katrina when it happened and was totally mishandled by a very well-equipped American administration, but we handled it well. In retrospect, one will have to say 2020 was handled pretty well compared to what's happened in 2021. So things have gone wrong. So the scrutiny that we have to put on what we are getting wrong must be there because we can't fix it otherwise. But if we don't put scrutiny on a very real threat, that every one of these variants coming our way, and who knows which is the next one, could be bioengineered. And today you can bioengineer in such a way that you can't tell the difference whether the mutant is actually created naturally or being created in a lab. That if we don't put scrutiny, then we are just opening ourselves to victimization, and that requires an equal thought. So scrutiny must happen to how we are handling our own affairs. And that's all of our jobs. And then equal scrutiny should happen. And I can't, when I watch these debates and open hearings going on in America, and they have a flawed system, can't figure out why we don't have these open debates and open hearings going on. Why we don't have a probe into the origins of the coronavirus? Why we can't have members of parliament calling in experts and listening to testimony, calling in the whistleblowers, listening to their testimony, appointing Indian agencies to find out how this came into India. It's a thought process because if we want to be global leaders, then we can't be waiting for America to take the global lead. It's a thought. But beyond that, the logic that has been discussed in this conversation and which has been told to me repeatedly off camera is that a lot of work is going on. All these trips that Jaishankar and Harsh Shringla are taking are not holiday trips. They've gone everywhere from Southeast Asia to Maldives to Seychelles to the UK to the US. That action is happening. And in the end, if we are a strong economy, we can take on all these other challenges.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.